Howdy folks, Not Jay from Not Jay's Tabletop Gaming, and this is our third installment on So You Want to Run a Convention Game. Howdy folks, it's Not Jay with Not Jay's Tabletop Gaming, and this is our third installment of So You Want to Run a Convention Game series, and we've looked at figuring out what rules you want to play. Then we've also covered that you need to know the rules once you've got that taken care of. Now we want to look at what we're going to do for a scenario. How do you go about choosing a scenario? Well, in my experience, when choosing a scenario, it's best to look at movies, books, TV shows, that type of thing to give you inspiration. Also, you can look at different events of history if you're going to be playing a historical game. These are all ways of getting ideas and inspiration to create your scenario. Again, you need to tailor that scenario to the number of players you're expecting to have on the table. Again, a good number is 4 to 8 players. You also need to make sure that you can run with an odd number of players. Be prepared to have to get 5 or 7, even 3 players to be able to get them to be able to effectively play. So what I have done in the past is I've either gone with a book. One that I have used a couple times is Team Yankee for Cold War stuff. Maybe not a direct scenario out of the book, not from one of the chapters, but maybe not one of the chapters directly out of the book, but definitely getting me an idea of how to set it up. What size of units I'm looking at playing with. The Americans and NATO being company sized, and the Soviets and Warsaw Pact being battalion sized, or am I going to make it smaller? Am I going to make it bigger? Again, it also depends on what rule set you're going to be using. So if I'm going to be using Fistful of Lead, I'm not going to have a company-sized force on either side, because that would just be too big, because I'm using a figure to represent a figure. Now, I could go bigger battles and maybe get platoon-sized, or if I go small enough in scale, again, and we're going to talk about what scales to choose when we talk about what miniatures to use. But something like Fistful of Lead and even bigger battles, if we're going with 15s or 28s, we're still going to be at max with bigger battles. We're going to be at max platoon size level. So you definitely need to make sure that the rules that you've chosen will fit with the size of the scenario you want to play with. So it's important to, again, fully grasp and understand the rules that you're using so as to not bog yourself down. The other things I have looked at for doing scenarios, obviously Star Wars, because I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I've created several scenarios for Fistful of Lead Galactic Heroes using Star Wars. I have done a couple of different historical battles or semi-historical battles with my Ocean Thunder. You can do plenty of World War II games with Fistful of Lead or Fistful of Lead bigger battles, as long as they're small actions. You can go bigger actions if you use chain of command or ain't bit shot mum. So, I mean, there's, again, as long as you understand the constraints of your rules, you can do just about anything with your games. I've even created some historical scenarios using Check Your Six Jet Age. So find something that interests you. That's the other thing when you're wanting to run a convention game. It's got to be interesting to you. You've got to have some sort of passion about it. Either, for me, Star Wars. You've got, I love Star Wars, so anything I do scenario-wise with Star Wars is gonna really get me excited and really get me creative with about what I'm wanting to do. I also love naval combat, so when I started working with Ocean Thunder, obviously I'm gonna come up with some pretty interesting games there. I wholly intend to come up with a Surigao Strait scenario. It's going to be it might be kind of boring for the Japanese because it's pretty much target practice for the Americans, but I think it would just be really cool to see that on the table. The other thing you have to realize when you are creating that scenario, not only are you coming up with what models to use and how to create the forces, you got to come up with what the table is going to look like, how your the layout of your scenery is going to be. So it's all tied together. The rules have to be the appropriate to be able to handle the appropriate size of the battle you want to have. You've got to make sure that your table is there with the proper size. And this is all part of creating the scenario, and you've got to have a good write-up for it, because when you submit it to the convention, that's what they're going to put into the program to get people seeing your game. So you want to make it exciting. You want to let people know in a very brief little short blurb what is happening in the game. So give it a good title. Give it a quick rundown of what the scenario is about. Get people excited by the scenario that you've created. So it all ties together. Knowing the rules, it's building. We've got the rules figured out. Then we make sure we know the rules as best we can. Again, you're not going to know everything. And then, figure out your scenario and get it prepped, get it designed. Draw it out, draw the map out on some graph paper or just a plain sheet of paper, so you know what you're looking at, where it's going. So these are all parts of getting a convention game put together. And so once you've got that scenario generated, your next step is figuring out what miniatures you're going to play with. And that's going to be our next video. Until next time, we'll see you on the flip side.